Welcome to Golf Industry Guru and the Gig Podcast, where we interview the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. On today's episode, you will learn some proven real-world solutions that'll help you and your team solve some of your biggest golf business challenges. So stick around for some tips, tools, and training to get you, your people, and your business powered on. Here's your host, Scott Massey.
James, it's always great to see you. We were talking a little bit offline before we started here with Colin that we should cut our preamble as much as possible today, jump right into it as much as possible. What a guest. I mean, when you think about Colin and Winged Foot, what a historic club. Few clubs in the world have the history that they have, hosting all of the major championships, 6 U.S. Opens, a PGA Championship in 1997, won famously by Davis Love III. Remember the rainbow over the 18th green. Throw in there a U.S. Senior Open in 1980, a couple U.S. Women's Opens, a couple U.S. Amateurs. Extremely impressive. And what I think is also extremely impressive is Colin Burns and his career at the club. And I'm super excited to hear about that and learn from him today, as I know you are too.
Scott, I don't know how we do it. I don't know what we must. There must be some checks going out the door that you're sending to people, because we have been so fortunate. But the reality is that people like Colin give their time to help others, and it's so obvious when you look at his resume, his record, his involvement, his volunteerism, what Winged Foot has done, what he's done as a mentor and a coach. So I'm thrilled to have Colin here. I'm thrilled to pick his brain for the next hour. And so without further ado, let's bring on the man himself. So Mr. Colin Burns.
Gentlemen, good afternoon. Scott, James, nice to see you once again. By the way, before I forget, congratulations on your year anniversary. That's spectacular.
Oh, thank you so much. It's we're excited to still be around, and Gig Nation is growing, Colin, and as I mentioned earlier on, we've got members from all around the world that'll love to hear some of your insights and some of your stories, and really appreciate it. And so once again, thank you for your time. And as one of the things I've noticed, Colin, I've been online and looking at your LinkedIn posts, your social media, some your background. You are an extremely busy man. Holy smokes! Have you always been so engaged in the communication field of LinkedIn and of kind of educating and mentoring and getting your message out there? Is that something you've always kind of been active with?
Well, it's funny. I was recounting the story of when I first approached the board. Now, remember, when I got started, there was no social media.
Yeah.
1987 marks my 35th anniversary as a general manager, and I can clearly remember the handwritten chits when I got here. As a matter of fact, we didn't even have a point of sale machine, so it was really pretty primitive. Wonderful, but from a technology perspective, pretty primitive. So I remember the first time I mentioned having a website for the club, and this is at least 25 years ago. And there were these looks around the boardroom, like, what is a website? What are we going to do with a website? And I remember my response, and I didn't know anything about the technology other than I love to communicate. So I said, gentlemen, we're going to communicate. Everything that we send out in the mail, which we were doing, by the way, back then, is, I'm not sure, Scott, you don't look old enough. Maybe James, maybe, I'm not sure. But, we were sending out mail 3 and 4 times a week. The president would come in and say, oh, we'll send that out. So the copying machine was going nonstop. The postage machine was going nonstop. So I said, gentlemen, all we're going to do is this. We're going to take all of the things that we're sending out, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. We're going to put on this thing called the internet. And so I was really excited about it. So here we are, fast forward, 25 years. And now it's, we have 2 private Instagram accounts. We text message the membership on a regular basis for various things. We have a very active website. And so in terms of my interest as LinkedIn, and I prefer LinkedIn because I try not to get into some of the other sort of modalities, the Instagram I don't use. Twitter I use a little bit, but that gets a little bit sketchy. I'd rather keep it professional and keep it sort of in my wheelhouse. And so once I started playing around with LinkedIn, I said, well, I really like this. And so as it evolved and I watched it, and we're very fortunate. We have a wonderful young lady here who is I think she has the longest title in the club. It's like membership, communication, social media. She has a great title, and she's a really smart young lady. And so she's helped me a little bit, as well. And so yes, so now that's the communication piece. I think it's critically important, and I know it's critically important that for us to do our jobs well and to be efficient in our jobs, we need to be able to communicate with the membership and with our colleagues. So in terms of mentoring, a whole different topic. And so that's something I've always done within my own little community. But then once that community was enlarged by LinkedIn and other social media opportunities, that's broadened somewhat.
Colin, it's interesting. You talk about texting members and all that stuff. And when people like me from outside, hear about Winged Foot, and as an iconic historical, facility, I have these visions of, like hushed hallways and, whispering luck, and all that kind of stuff. And so obviously, would it be fair to say that your club, you've embraced technology in that kind of modernization? Is that right? And so you brought the members and the board and everybody along with you in embracing innovation. Would that be fair to say? Or is it easy or is it a challenge?
No. Well, first of all, we have no hushed hallways here. This is an extremely active, fun-loving club. And what's funny? When I say fun, I didn't ever use fun in an end-of-year review until this past year when we were talking about our head professional, Mike Gilmore, who was the sixth head professional in our 100 years, which will be actually 2023. We'll celebrate our centennial. And as we were having this discussion with a couple of people on the executive committee, and one of them said, Mike Gilmore makes Winged Foot more fun. I said, I never thought about fun. I think about making things fun, but never actually sort of giving someone credit for just being, because it sounds like such a sort of almost like a childish term. But you know what? Mike Gilmore makes Winged Foot more fun. I'd like to think that I've made Winged Foot more fun as other colleagues have here. So there are no hushed hallways on a given Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Right down below me sits a place called Gio's Bar. Gio's is named after one of our longest serving employees. He's here, I'm thinking 37 years. This is my 30-year pin you can see here. So I'm part of our 30-year club. And it's become the social center of the club. And when I tell you it's lively, there's always a game on, always a golf match on. And so there's no hush hallways. In terms of the technology, I think the club played its role and the membership played its role because the membership wanted, as much as we wanted the technology, they wanted the technology. Now, we still have the phones answered by a receptionist. We still primarily take reservations, through the receptionist. I like those touch points. I find it distressing when I call, especially you call a finer club and it's automated attendant. I don't think that's, maybe on a closed day. I just don't find that appropriate. So again, it was a combination of the membership expecting more technology and us wanting to introduce that technology. And it's funny, just not too long ago, and I have a much younger staff than I am. And I said to one of them, I'd like to see an iPad wine list. I've seen them, I like them. And it was the younger staff that said, no, the members. I said, trust me, because I like technology. They're going to love it. Well, the members love the iPad wine list. The older members in particular, because they can enlarge the label. Yes. They can do a little quick reading. And so we're always looking at these kinds of things.
I love it. And so you talked about the 30-year pin, Colin. I think that's 10 times more than the average general manager either chooses to stay at a club or survives at a club. And so what, if someone says to you, and they will say to you, no doubt, what's been your secret or what's been the skills that we talk about governance all the time, obviously in our world. I was just in Australia 2 weeks ago and the number one topic being discussed was the challenges of managers and dealing with volunteer committees and meddling chairs and all kinds of stuff like that. And not to ask you the down and dirty, but in your experience, how how have you succeeded in that 30 years? And I'm sure you've had many different directors and many different presidents that have come and gone in your time. What does good governance at a club look like you, which is our first question that we got?
It's what you use the term survive, which a lot of members actually use when they talk about me. How did you survive? And I never really thought about it like surviving, I guess, from their perspective. And I think, it's funny, I've joked that, as many presidents as U.S. presidents as Fidel Castro dealt with, I've dealt with almost as many club presidents. If you look at his time from like the late 50s through whenever he passed, and then I think I'm up to 14 presidents at this point. And I think part of our particular model is being able to understand and adapt. And I think we'll get back to the concept of adapting, maybe a little bit later in the conversation. And you have to accept the fact that each person is different, and with them they bring different skills. Some of them are corporate, some of them are non-corporate. Some of them have a lot of experience running boards, some of them don't. And so you need to very quickly adapt to their style and try to partner with them as best as you can. It doesn't always work that way, but it's a partnership. When I interviewed here some 30 years ago, I remember distinctly saying to the search committee that I don't have all the answers. At that point, I was 32 years old. And I was, if you were handicapping me getting this job, I would have gone off at about 10,000 to 1 because nobody knew who I was. I worked at this little bitty club in Manhasset, Long Island, named Plandome Country Club, which I still am in touch with them. But anyway, if you would have handicapped me, there's basically no chance that I was going to get the job. But at the conclusion of it, I said to the gentleman, and I had a big smile, and I said, "Look, I don't know what your issues are." I said, "You probably don't even know what all your issues are." But I said, "Together, we will figure this out. I'm not bringing you all the answers. You're certainly not bringing me all the answers. You know certain things. I know certain things, and collectively, we will solve whatever those issues are." And I think that's been my sort of my mentality, my focus. I think the other thing is, it touches on focus. It's very important that when you're in my position and you've established yourself as a professional, and you have a sense of what the club looks like and feels like and the direction that it's going in, is to not constantly be pulled by the various administrations or boards. And all of them are well-intended. Some people go about expressing themselves differently, and that's part of human nature. But I think it's important for us as club professionals, hospitality professionals, to not be reactive. I know what I'm doing. Trust me. I always say I'm like the outfielder. If I'm calling, I got it. Yeah. Don't get under my feet. Don't. But and I'm the first one to say, I need help. I'll call you over. Let me share with you what I'm dealing with, and please give me your expertise. And I'm not embarrassed to do that. But most times, I'm hoping that as the GM of 30 plus years, that when I say I got it, and I'm out in the infield or in the outfield with my glove waiting, that they accept the fact that I'll 9 out of 10 times or 99 out of 100 times, I'll get it.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said. We have these conversations, conferences, seminars, roundtables about good governance, and sometimes we get caught up talking about, onboarding and about, training and strategic planning and documentation and all this paper that, we're supposed to just dump on a director and hope that everything's going to be perfect. And, the reality, as you said, is that it's about people. It's about having conversations and having relationships and trust. And that you can have the best onboarding process you want at your club. But if you've got a director that has an agenda, no matter what he or she wants to accomplish, we have to build a relationship of trust in order to kind of work through that. Would you agree in your experience?
No, I agree 100%. I think part of that is when the agenda is so overt, in at least from your perspective, you don't think that it's helpful to the member experience, which is the filter that I run everything through. Whether it's a capital improvement, whether it's a change in service, operational, doesn't enhance the member experience. And every once in a while, not very often, but every once in a while, you'll have somebody on a board. Not necessarily, by the way, I'm talking as an industry professional, not just as the GM of Winged Foot, but from my experience talking to hundreds of board members, hundreds of GMs. And I think I think in terms of that communication, that relationship is to address that elephant in the room, that personal agenda that you may, as the GM, as the professional, may not be comfortable with, and say, James or Scott, look, here's the thing, I'm concerned about where you're going with this, and have the dialogue. Now, in the end, and this is important for every young club manager, young hospitality professional who work for private clubs, you're an employee. So in the end, so this goes back to sort of the survival of 31 years. In the end, you have to accept that you're an employee. You conduct yourself professionally. You provide professional guidance. You try to express yourself forcefully when necessary. But in the end, you are an employee.
Colin, in the last couple of years, I think many of the club managers and people in the business that I talk to would say that there maybe has been a shift, there maybe has been some kind of changes in the world of volunteerism, in the world of what's in it for me, in the world, that it's a challenge to get directors, volunteers, committee members to always be thinking about what's best for the grand club, for what's best for the club in the long term, as opposed to what's the issue I want to solve today because I don't like the French fries. Have you seen in your experience any changes, good or bad, that have come out of the last couple of years when it comes to volunteerism or committee or wants and needs of the people that put their hand up? Have you seen anything like that?
Well, the first thing I want to know is what's wrong with the French fries, because that. No, I'm kidding. It's yes, there has been a change. I think it's funny. I'll put it in the context of my career. What's very different is the change in the generational change. So here I was. If you think about this, I'm 32 years old, and almost every person I dealt with on the board level was a World War II veteran. Yeah. Right? You think about that. So they had their own sort of perspectives on life, about life outside of the club, life inside the club, and they wore, I can remember some of them very vividly. They would wear their blazers in the grill room, no matter how hot it was, and we don't do this stuff, and this is a golf club, and don't forget that. And they had a certain style, as being again primarily, exclusively men. Back then, who had served in World War II, and sort of that generation, there was a certain directness about them. There was a certain, I wouldn't say civility, because here civility is incredibly important and held very dear to us. But there's a certain directness to these guys. It wasn't always pleasant directness. Sometimes it could be direct to the point where that hurt my feelings a little bit. And so now so I'm just dealing with, so now things have changed. Now I'm the 60-year-old, and the boards are now, the board here and in other places, right? I mean, boards continually get younger, right? As we age, that board is recycling itself. And so that's a bit of a change. And I'm not sure if it has anything to do with the quality of the person who's coming onto the board. I think that part of it is the fact that some of them don't have the experience being around private clubs, the way some of us who have spent our lives doing that. I think sometimes people jump in too quickly. And again, I'm not talking about Winged Foot, but just boards. When I talk to either Henry Delozier, whether I talk to Rob Hill, no matter who it is, there's this common sort of thread where and this is part of this is the absence of being first and foremost concerned with the member experience and thinking more in terms of bottom line finances and forgetting that we're in the hospitality business. And I think that's a little bit of a discount. I'm on the board now and I want to let's do this and let's do that. Well, let's everybody time out. Let's just think a little bit. We've done well for a long time, and maybe we need to just reflect a little bit. So I think that there's that There's certainly a generational change. The people who are on boards now are certainly much different from those people who, again, when I started in the business. And in terms of just general volunteerism, I wonder sometimes. I mean, I do quite a bit of volunteering, and I don't know. I mean, those people who are good of heart and who have a genuine interest, whether it's in my case the Gladney Center for Adoption, which I'm very active with, or whether it's Wingfoot Golf Club or some other club, I think, I'm very optimistic. I believe that people are there trying to do good for either their club or whatever that particular organization is. So James, just to tell me a little bit more about what you were thinking in terms of what you're hearing about volunteers.
Well, I think similar, it's a similar conversation to I think our next question, if you don't mind, Scott, because I think our next question is about leadership. And what I'm hearing a lot of is just that, look, there's a power shift. Things have changed, right? So pre-COVID, you could still yell at a person in the kitchen and they would stay their job. They wouldn't quit. Pre-COVID, you could, you'd beg the customer to pay you in advance, or if you're a golf club that is looking to fill their tee sheet or fill their membership. I think I remember hearing a stat, something like pre-COVID, 66% of clubs in the United States didn't have a waiting list, and today it's like 13% don't have a waiting list. So obviously there's been a change, and we talk about people's there's studies that would show that customers' expectations have changed in a good way in lots of cases. I mean, the whole club article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of days ago about the resurgence of private clubs and the home feeling, and that's where I want to hang out with my friends and family and like-minded people. So there's lots of positives that have impacted, obviously, the club business. My question for you is, in your experience to a young, up-and-coming or a struggling manager, do you think there are some challenges today with staffing, dealing with the Gen Zs and the millennials and all the different things? What you must have different challenges today managing your club, Colin, than you would have a decade ago or 2 decades ago. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing general managers, club leaders in the industry these days?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about staffing for a minute. There's no getting around. And I was at the National Club Association conference down in Charleston, and whether it was at the PGA show in Orlando or whether it was at the CMAA World Conference out in San Diego, all of us are talking about the same thing: staffing. So it's really gotten complicated. I know we have positions listed with some staffing agencies offering top dollar benefits, the opportunity to work at a very established club with a worldwide reputation. We can't get people. And here we are right next to New York, where all these restaurants have closed, just like in San Diego and Miami. We can't figure out for the life of us where did all these people go? Where did all these people who worked for Charlie Palmer and who worked for whoever it was, and all these wonderful Michelin star rated restaurants, where are they? Well, they're not coming to the clubs, which is really a shame, because clubs provide such stability in terms of employment. You're not worried about the owner of the restaurant not making payroll. You have a whole different standard of life. So I think it's funny, you touched on a couple of things. So once you get them in the door, right? So you finally get that one employee in the door. And to your point was, you could yell at them. Well, we don't yell here, but I get your point. I mean, you could treat different people differently. We didn't really have to worry about onboarding new employees. They came, they sort of fit in. If they didn't work out, you get somebody. Now we have great pride in our longevity program here, and we can talk about that separately. I mean, in terms of how we recognize senior employees. How we celebrate the fact that Umberto's here 37 years and Oscar, Cesar, Giovanni, they're all 35 years. We do a booklet every year where we highlight all of their career highlights and their family life and how many years they've been here, and so we take great pride in that. So what we've been focused on, I'll just tell you personally, what we've been focused on this year is being very, very involved with these employees, our new employees, our new colleagues, right from day one. So we're doing a much more intensive orientation. We're doing a lot of one-on-ones. We're making sure that, and I do it personally, by the way. How are you? Everything okay? Do you have what you need? Which is something you didn't do years ago. By the way, I happen to love it. I think it's a great process. We're doing more socials. We're off property from 4 to 6 p.m. We go to a local, cafe, coffee, wine, whatever it is, and spend some time just talking because it's fascinating. In this process of some people say, "Oh, we're now coddling. We're now letting kids who have tattoos or whatever we're allowed." Well, this is who they are. They're not bad people. They're not. They may not look like me or sound like me, but it doesn't mean that they're not hospitality capable. And so you can really. It's a very interesting learning experience when a brand new employee. In years past, you wouldn't have even asked them their opinion, but now you ask them their opinion, and you go, "I never thought about that. That's a really good point. Why don't we ? So now I make sure that every new employee in the clubhouse, they go down to the golf shop. I make sure they have a new polo, a new hat. Part of what we're trying to do is really get them to feel what it's like to be a part of Wingfoot. Not just you're working at a blank page. You're working at Wingfoot. Here's our history. Here is here's what we've done in the world of golf. Here's what we do for the community, so that they really have a sense of, yeah, you know what? It's a pretty cool place to work. It's not just a place to work. It's a cool place to work. It's a fun place to work. It's a safe place to work. And so, that has been a challenge, but I don't look at it like it's been not a burden, but a challenge with some definite benefits in terms of these new employees educating us in terms of what we could do better.
Yeah, no, I love it. I like to say that you have two customers now, and you better take care of both of them, because one of them is your member, your customer, and the other one is your employee. And they both require the same service. They both require the same compassion, empathy, discussion, conversation, overcoming complaints, all those types of things. And I think what's interesting, Colin, that I've seen is that those managers that have always been people. Okay. So there are, and we're totally generalizing, but there are managers that are doers that sit at their desk and do a great job in Excel spreadsheets and come out once a week to make sure the parking lot's clean. And then there are general managers that shake hands and kiss babies all day long and find a way to get the Excel spreadsheets done and the parking lot clean. And those managers that are people are struggling much less with attracting, retaining, keeping, motivating long-term employees and dealing with this issue. But this HR issue is huge, and it's until we have robots cleaning dishes and raking bunkers, we're going to be in for a very bumpy ride, I think.
Well, there's no question. I mean, you want to shut down a restaurant, which I grew up in the restaurant business. You want to shut down a restaurant. I mean, a chef can walk out, but a dishwasher walks out. I mean, and it's a tough, and it's one of those things. I'm terribly empathetic because I literally grew up standing next to adult men, some of them African American, some of them who had been in Vietnam, had served, who had issues. I think about the various cultures that passed through my father's restaurant, and there I was, at 10, 11, 12 years old. So I have great sympathy. And one of the things I always do is I always stop into the dish room, and I see Garth, I see Carlton. Carlton has terrible allergies, and last year he kept talking about he couldn't afford Flonase. So I bought several bottles of Flonase, brought it down there, and said, "Here, make sure you use this." And we have conversations about the music. He loves old time sort of Motown, James Brown, which I love, and I'll go back there and talk to him about it a little bit because I love it. And so I think your point, James, is that it's true. If you're comfortable around people, this is the time to thrive. This is the time where you can even dive deeper into that and find. We have some really great new staff, And it's forced us, and I know that sounds a little pejorative, not forced us, but it's this environment has compelled us to spend more time with them, talking to them, and it's just I've found it. I mean, it's been a really good experience, except for the fact that at times we've been too reliant on temporary staff. But even the temporary staff, if you have the presence of mind, and we're very fortunate that we're busy and we have no issues with membership and generally with finances, we can attract better temporary staff. But even those people, you need these folks who are taking time out of their lives to be here on Mother's Day. Every mother who works Mother's Day gets a gift from me, and we started a long time ago. Every father who works Father's Day gets a gift. But the mothers in particular, these people, the temporary staff, they're part of your team. I mean, whether you see them once, and some of them, as a matter of fact, the other day, one of them gave me a big hug, Mr. Burns, I hadn't seen you in so long. How are you? And this is a temporary staff person. I was like, oh, Veronica, oh my God, good to see how's your mom? Well, and so you can't be on the sidelines anymore.
I love it. There are so many nuggets already in this first 30 minutes. But Scott, if a young manager takes away one lesson and they use the term dish room in the future instead of the alternative that I hear so many people use, that is a brilliant takeaway. I love that you just said dish room, because that's one of my pet peeves. It is my pet peeve, Colin, when I hear someone talk about a dish pit, and I'm like, who do you think wants to work in a dish pit? There's no such thing. There's no such place. I love it.
That's terrible.
Colin, as I said, I've been going through all your stuff, and no doubt, and we all know as managing clubs and being in our business, it's a 24-hour a day kind of program. We when our phone rings at 6 a.m, it might be the superintendent telling us that there's a flood on the 5th green. So how do you? I know you're involved in obviously everything from hosting events to charities, to foundations, to volunteerism, to your no doubt your own hobbies and travel and things like that. What's your secret to a manager struggling? Because we do some surveys of managers, and this is always in the top 3 or 4 of the issues that they find is causing great stress in their life and making them consider, is it all worth it? Is their inability to find a work-life balance, whether it's from a membership that's demanding, a board that's demanding, they've been unable to set boundaries, they don't have the right management team that they've delegated to, and so they're a tight AAA personality that does it all themselves. There's lots of reasons why we struggle to find a work-life balance, but what advice would you give someone on how to try to do it? And maybe you don't even think that you do it. I don't know, but I'm making this up.
You're talking to the wrong guy. Yeah. I'm still trying to figure that out. The first thing I say to people is, tell me what profession you're going to get into that's not going to require you to work your ass off at the beginning. Tell me what. Doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. Tell me what you want to do that's not going to require you to work really hard your first 10 years. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so when I hear that, I'm not terribly empathetic, particularly for people who have seasonal jobs. Look, our job is seasonal, right? So January, February, it's very quiet. So you have to sort of, I think that's where it begins, where you say to your family and you say to your board, here's May to October, 24/7, 7 days a week. What do you want me to do? No problem. I answer emails. I mean, sometimes if I'm sleepless, I'm sending, emails at 4:00 in the morning. And I like that. It gets it off my mind. I get it done. But in the off season, there has to be some, that's where you have to set the boundaries. I think it's hard to set boundaries in season. We're working. We're busy. We have people showing up. These are hard stops. This is not, I'll get to you tomorrow. There's no tomorrow. It's funny. I'm working on a transition guide for when I end my tenure here at December 31st of this year after 31 years. And one of the things, we had this great old iconic central casting caddy master. His name was Pat Collins. And Pat would take action on horses. he always had his own little guest thing going on, and he was right out of Caddyshack, Central Casting, but he was a very smart man. And I remember where we were standing and when he said it, and he said, "Colin," as he said it like, "Hey, Colin, at Wingfoot Golf Club, you do things now." And I remember we were standing in the grill room hallway, exactly where we were, and that was embedded. And I don't think I was here a week at that point. I said to myself, you know what? He guts it. Yeah. You got to do everything's now. We are in now environment. I'd say April to October, it's now. And if you don't get it done now, you're not going to get it done. So I'm not quite answering your question about work-life balance. But part of this, it's a job. I mean, this is, who again, what industry do you go into where you work 35 hours a week and have weekends off? And then, by the way, have, a big chunk of January, February off.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. Number one is work-life balance doesn't mean 50-50. Number one, doesn't mean 50-50. Number two is that you got to figure out if you want 5 days a week, 9 to 5, this is the wrong business for you. Period. I've said that to people all the time. A young golf pro, a young manager, young chef, whatever. If you want a 9 to 5 job that's secure, that you get a retirement plan, this is the wrong industry for you. Yeah. If you want to succeed really quickly and leapfrog over your competitors, this is a perfect industry for you because there's lots of things that you can do. And I love what you're saying about the fact that, now I think that you talk about coddling and this is an onboarding new employees. This is the same thing about we have to make sure that we set the table properly with our leadership team and with our staff even about these types of conversations about what do you think work-life balance means to you? What does that mean to you? I want every second weekend off on 3 days. Okay, well, here's how we're going to make that work. But I love what you say, which is my message that I take from that is that we have to be more forthright in our conversations with young people in this industry about what it takes to be successful. And I love that you very quickly, just succinctly said, you can't be successful in any job if you're not willing to work hard and work long hours, started, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I love it.
So now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say.
Good.
You go.
No, so now with those people who are my colleagues who are younger than I am, who are hopefully going to be here after I've left, I have that same conversation with them, and this goes back to your point about having a forthright, earnest conversation. And I say to them all the time, you can't have it both ways. You can't be off January, February, part of March, and then not work really hard in season. Now we understand you have young children. You work it out among yourselves that, if you get the second weekend, whatever it is, but you simply can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be off all winter and then say, oh, I need this week off in July or I need this week off in August. It just doesn't work that way.
Well, you probably don't have much work-life balance when you're hosting a U.S. Open. And so, I guess my question, this was a question that kind of was brought forward, and I love this question because I think it's a brilliant one. I would love to hear, locker room stories and, who showed up late because they were hungover and all those kind of fun things, that I can imagine hosting PGA tournaments provides. But really, Colin, in your experience, what's the lessons that you think a club that's hosting their own club championship and not a U.S. Open, what's your lessons about hosting major events, and is it so much fun that it's worth kind of signing up every few years? Is the work must be unbelievable. The work and the stress and the pressure and worrying about the weather gods and the volunteer gods and everything else must be unbelievable. So
it's worth every ounce of effort. 1997 was such a remarkable experience. The club had a little bit of a falling out with the USGA in 1984. We didn't have the greatest of opens. And so we were weren't sure where we were with the USGA. And this is not too much inside baseball, just a little bit. And so, we were approached by the PGA, and long story short, we hosted the 1997 PGA Championship, and it was absolutely breathtaking how much fun it was. I actually got up at about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I worked on the grounds crew, and I pushed. We were mowing all the fairways with greens mowers. So I was assigned 2 little bitty par 3 fairways, and I got up and we had flashlights and we had to find the dew pattern from the day before because we were doing this crosshatch cut. And then I'd come in, I'd run upstairs in the office here, take a quick shower, and then go back the rest of the day. And it was absolutely just thrilling. And to have Justin Leonard, Davis Love in that final group, to have Davis win. What a great champion. And it was hard work and so much fun. And then you fast forward to 2004 with the U.S. Amateur, 2006 U.S. Open. The 06 Open was a monster. We had unbelievable attendance. The club showed really well. The USGA was still, it was sellout from corporate hospitality. There wasn't much room on the property. I think Friday of 2006, we probably had, 37,500, probably closer to 40,000 people. And it was, we were packed, but we were really proud of the way things turned out. Now, in terms of locker room, though, the one story I can tell you is, and it's really burnt into my memory, is looking at Phil Mickelson and his wife, Amy, and Bones in the locker room after he had just lost. And it was too upsetting. I didn't have the presence of mind to pull out a camera or a phone and take a picture. But it was one of the more memorable moments in a very sad way that this great player, and forget all the live stuff. I'm not interested in that right now. Just Phil at the time, beloved by the New York crowd, really loved by Wingfoot, and having sort of blown the U.S. Open the way he did. It was really a sad moment. And so now fast forward again to 2020. Well, what made 2020 really unique was the fact that in March of 20, COVID was running rampant, and we got on a phone call about the second week of March. It's probably around the 15th, and we said we're going to have to pull the plug. We got to stop construction immediately. We were literally just beginning to build the 10 complexes. And the lesson from all of that, and I won't bore you with all of it, but the lesson from that is it really demonstrated when people work together, the USGA and Wingfoot, and then the USGA with the folks, with Fred Ridley and the folks down with the Masters, with Jay Monahan from the PGA Tour, trying to figure out all the various schedules. And we worked so cooperatively. And the one thing that I think we all kept in mind was it's a game. And the game was not at that moment in any way more important than all the folks who were dying around us. I mean, we're 4 miles from New Rochelle, where the epicenter was. The ambulances were running nonstop. It was just, we were so preoccupied with COVID. And to a person, each week we'd have a phone call. And in some way, whether explicitly or implicitly, we would remind each other, it's just a game. We want to host the Open very much. And so when we were given the date of September, we jumped on it immediately. Now, imagine if you would, or anyone listening, so you just planned this party, and say you planned a party for the last couple of months. Well, we planned this party for 5 years out, and we had 22,000 hardscape, parking spaces. We had hotel rooms. We had security. We had worked with the governor's office, the county executive's office. We had everything in line. We'd sold tickets. We had printed tickets. We had hang tags, these gorgeous, I got one back there, gorgeous hang tags that we had for the membership. Okay, put all of it up on the shelf. We're going to move it to September. There's going to be no spectators. You're going to have to COVID test everybody who's on the property. And you're going to try to make the best of it. Well, it turned out to be a great U.S. Open. The club showed beautifully because there was no infrastructure. And so, and we had 450, besides players and a little bit of media, in the USGA, we had 450 member volunteers. That was it. It was as quiet as it is in my office right now in the fairways. It was really something to behold. I mean, to see a major championship that was so quiet, nobody yelling, "You're the man," in the hole, people spilling beer. It was really quite an experience. And I think what it did was it set the landscape for the future where the Marions and the Shinnecocks are going, wow, that's pretty nice. Now it's not economically viable, and we all know that. But it just, I think it changed the perspective on opens a little bit to say, wow, it's kind of nice with less people, kind of nice with less tents. So what the future holds, I don't know, but it was really quite an exercise, sort of unwinding all of that and then recalibrating for this open that was to be held, several months later. It was a great experience.
Is of all the events you've seen and you've hosted, is Davis Love on the green or Phil, like if someone said, "What's your favorite moment?" Your favorite moment from all of the events and the club hosting these kind of championships, what would you answer that with?
Maybe Ryan Moore coming back from, and I'll probably get it wrong, but being 3 down with 4 to go in the 2004 U.S. Amateur, it was spectacular golf. I think Davis Love, the way he finished it was a spectacular. He hit 2-iron, 8-iron in the rain to finish up. In the 1997 PGA Championship, it was just masterful. So I'd say those are, and I'd say the non-golf events, the non-golf moments. Hanging out with Adam Scott, having a beer, getting to know Phil pretty well, spending time with Matt Fitzpatrick, who's a great young champion. Those are pretty special moments. And then, I've been very fortunate to be a part of, through my friendship with Jim Nance and friends at Rolex. I've been to several events where you're standing in the buffet line and there's Jack Nicklaus and then there's Ian Poulter and there's this whole host of people and you get to meet them and that's really been very special. The personal, because, look, when they're doing their job, it's like any other person doing their job. They're not to be interrupted and they've got their game face on. But so many of the guys off the course are just really very sweet and just, just nice to be around. So those moments will remain very special to me. The one-on-one time.
We're not going to get political, but here's going to be my takeaway from what I just heard you talk about, which is that the game is bigger than any individual, and you can, that's the great thing about the game. I have played with billionaires and I've played with, people that are scraping their $30 together to play once a week. And when you get on the golf course or you get an experience, we're all just people that love the game and met so many wonderful people through the game of golf, right? That I think is so fascinating. Colin, you obviously, like you mentioned, have been to some great events and have had a chance to, restaurants or clubs or facilities, but do you go to other places and go, hey, that's what I'm trying. That's what I want.
All the time. All the time. I'm stealing whatever I can.
Yeah.
I can remember doing it. When I first started, this is one of these things, right? So strange to me, but there was this electric hand dryer that I saw at this club up in Niagara Falls. And I said, God, I want that one. I got to have that one. And we bought them and installed them. And so I've always been, whether it was the note paper in a phone booth, all these little things that I've always, the amenities in the bathrooms. But it's when I read this, I love this question, by the way, because I think the guest experience, the member experience, can happen anywhere. I think about where I've had really great experience, and I'll get to clubs in a minute. But you could be at the local deli, and it's the way you're greeted, the way that could let me just. I'm gonna sidetrack for a minute. So you talk about what's hospitality, right? So one of the fundamentals of hospitality is hospitality comes to you; it doesn't wait for you, right? So if James or Scott are walking through the front door, I don't wait for them to come to me; I come to them. Gentlemen, how are you? Good to see you. And that's what we do. At Wingfoot, we like to say that we treat members like family and guests like members, right? That's sort of our motto. And we're welcoming, we're warm, and we come to you. If I see somebody standing in the lobby, I won't wait for them to come to me. I'll say, sir, can I help you? Who's your host today? Well, come on in. No, don't wait for them. Come on in. Fine, let's get your locker. That's that's what hospitality is about. When the person who's providing that hospitality comes to you, comes at you with that welcome. That's great. And that can happen anywhere. That can happen in Delhi. That can happen in, I mean, look, I was with some dear friends from Paris not too long ago. Matter of fact, last Saturday night, we were at a Michelin star, beautiful restaurant. How was the service? It was fine. Was it great? No, it wasn't great. Welcome. They're too busy being whoever they were to sort of really take a moment and make you feel welcome, right? Don's, I quote every day, and if you saw my whiteboard in my little garage gym where I have 4 quadrants, and I have sort of gardening, which is my number one passion, and then I have Wingfoot Golf Club, and then I have exercise, fitness, and then I have finance, whatever. And in the hospitality quadrant, I have a quote from Don Smith, who worked at Washington State University. Look at me, smile at me, talk to me, thank me. Look at me, smile at me, talk to me, thank me. Anybody who wants to learn anything about it, if you can't do that, then you're not a hospitality person. Look at me, smile at me, talk to me, thank me. Boom. That can happen anywhere.
Colin, can you teach that, or is it inbred? Can you teach it?
No, I don't believe that. There are people who don't get it. And by the way, they're great at their Excel spreadsheets. They're great at doing these other things. Some of us just I mean, look, my mother and father. My mother was never that person. My father was always that person, whether it was Elizabeth Taylor walking into the restaurant, whether it was Richard Burton, whether it was Cary Grant, where we were located. He thought nothing of walking up, how are you? And everything in his restaurant was signed, your host, Harry Burns, because he was your host, Harry Burns. And that's how I feel about here. But so in terms of club operations, I mean, there's such, it doesn't have to be, they're all the famous, the Augusta Nationals, Pine Valleys. Are those the best experiences? Those are wonderful experiences. I think Baltusrol, great operation. The Country Club, now with Kristen LeCount, prior to that was being run by David Shag. Fabulous operation. Monterey Peninsula, unbelievable operation. You go there, you get the sense that things are right. Right from the minute you pull up, the Valley Parkers, boom. It all begins. In our case, I like to say it begins. We have gates on each entrance, gate to gate. It's got to be gate to gate. Everything has to be. It's not just. Well, the lobby's clean. That's it. It's are the gates clean? Are they opening properly? Is the keypad, and then it's all the way in, and then all the way back out. So I am always. It's funny. I think at the time I was at a CMA conference in San Antonio, and the young lady behind the desk sewed the button onto my jacket, and that was probably 1995. I'll never forget that. That was to me one of the greatest sort of moments of hospitality, guest services, and it was no effort. And she wasn't looking. It was not like New York where she may be looking to get a $20 tip out of it. It was no. Let me do that for you. Button was sewn on. Enjoy the rest of the evening. And to this day I remember that.
Well, what I love too is that you talk about the deli. You talk about the simple kind of thank me and greet me and look at my eye and care about me and all those types of things. You don't need to be Augusta to be memorable. You can be your own little 9-hole golf course in Timbuktu, wherever. You create your own mystique. You create your own culture, your own brand. It doesn't require a U.S. Open golf course to have a great. In fact, there's lots of great golf courses that, like you said, the Michelin restaurant, right? I mean, they're working really hard at making sure that the appetizer is the right size, but that's you want the personal engagement. Colin, no doubt you've had many mentors in your life, and I think this is our final question. No doubt you've had mentors in your life that have helped you, or that you've taken inspiration from. I'm doing a little podcast, not a little podcast. I'm doing an incredibly important podcast in a few days about mentorship, and we were talking about the difference between a coach and a mentor. But for you, and I no doubt people reach out to you and kind of are looking at you to pick your brain, and you obviously have, I no doubt, management team that have worked for you over the last 3 decades and have moved on to other opportunities, and you've obviously mentored them and helped them grow and helped them prosper. What for those people out there that are looking for a mentor And for those people out there that are sometime approached to be a mentor, what are some qualities that you would suggest are important?
It's funny. I think of the first president who I worked for here at Wingfoot. His name was Paul Hicks. He's the grandfather of Hope Hicks, who's in the Trump administration. Paul was Mr. Hicks. I never called him Paul. Mr. Hicks was a senior ranking executive at Texaco. He was an infantryman in the Marine Corps, and his mentorship has remained with me to this day. Now, what made him great? What made him great was his honesty, was his care in my well-being as a professional and as a person, his ability to explain what he thought I needed to do better, and his ability to explain what he thought I wasn't doing well, and the whys and the wherefores of those two pluses and minuses. It wasn't just, here's your bonus and see you, and try to. It was and he had that corporate experience, which which trained him, I guess, through the Marine Corps and then at Texaco, which really trained him to lead, to explain, to help you visualize who you could be, and help you also visualize what he thought you shouldn't be doing in terms of whatever it may be, without getting into the details. And I saved. It's funny. I still have my first review that he wrote, and everything was written, by the way. And it was he had somebody type it up, who knows? And I still have it, and it was so cordial, so supportive, and yet very honest about certain things that he felt I needed to improve on. And I value that letter. I've saved it. I read it from time to time, and I've always thought that's what you do. You take a genuine interest in the person. You explain to them at some level of detail what the pros, the cons, and what the future can look like if you follow this path. I'll never forget him saying, and as a matter of fact, that's one of the things up on my whiteboard in terms of longevity. He said, "Young man, I've seen plenty of guys work well for 1 year. Let's see you do it for a long time." And he's right. You can sprint and maybe win the race, but this isn't a sprint. A career is a marathon. A career is something you do. You don't plod, but you don't necessarily sprint. You're careful along the path. You make choices. You be mindful about things. And so I think I explained, what I learned from him as a mentor. I love mentoring. I think two of my favorite sort of students, if you will, have moved on to other jobs. Both of them Latinas, by the way, different parts of the world. One young lady is from Peru, one's from Dominican Republic. I happen to think this is a great time in the industry for females, for women of color, whether it's Latinas, whether it's African Americans. I think the industry has for too long sort of neglected that part of our population. Look, it was a male-dominated industry, and I think that's going to change. So my two great mentees. One is now the general manager, Lily Braswell, who's the general manager at the Field Club of Greenwich, and then Ileana Valerio, who is now the assistant general manager at a local club, Westchester Hills. I'm so remarkably proud of them. And by the way, this was not coddling. This was a lot of tough love, a lot of tough conversations, and I hear from them constantly about the lessons, and some of the lessons I didn't even know that I was teaching them. They were just observing, watching, and so I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of the other people who have moved on to other clubs. It is essential. You cannot do this alone. You cannot learn this industry alone. I spent my entire career asking questions, whether it's board members, past board members, which are always fun to talk to, and other professionals within the industry. There's too much going on to think that you can do it yourself. So if you get the chance, be a great mentor. And how do you be a great mentor? As I said with Mr. Hicks, be honest, be earnest about, come from a place of goodness. My wife always says, come from a place of goodness. And that's another thing. It's funny on my whiteboard. Come from a place of goodness. When you're mentoring someone, you're reviewing someone, even if it's quote negative, you still come from a place of goodness because you want them to succeed. And I think it's one of the great gifts that you have is to be able to mentor someone. I consider it's not a burden. It's a blessing to be able to have someone say, hey, do you mind if I, it's funny, a brand new employee in the kitchen named Shaquille, he said to Mr. Burns, I just want to talk to you for a minute. So I went downstairs and he said, I'm also interested in photography and poetry. I said, wow, Shaquille, that's really cool. He comes in every day, by the way, and this is a line cook, comes in every day with a blazer because he sees the way I dress. So he wears a blazer every day. And he'll say to me, did you see that one today? And I'll say, oh, beautiful. Like the color. And so we end up talking about, photography that I don't know much about, photography, poetry, which I know a little bit about. And so it's a great, to me, it's a great, especially at this point in my career, it's such a great opportunity and such a blessing.
Well, Colin, you have certainly mentored us today. And, just my goodness, so many wonderful takeaways for our Gig Nation to help them in their journey, whether they're an experienced club manager or whether they're, a line cook that's just interested in enjoying themselves or moving through this industry. So just couldn't thank you enough for your generosity. Very excited about your future steps. I'm sure we'll hear all about that. And for those of you that are not following Colin on LinkedIn, I strongly suggest you do, because there's always things to learn and people to be connected to and people to meet from. And Colin, just couldn't thank you enough more. Scott, any final thoughts?
Pleasure, Scott. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, so evident how fortunate the club is to have you, Colin, and how fortunate your team members are to have you. And boy, we were sure fortunate to have an hour of your time today. So thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure.
You're a very giving person, and means a lot to have you on the show today. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
If you're ever in New York, make sure you come say hello.
We will.
I'm coming there next week. I'm going to send you an email shortly. I'm hoping to tee it up on Friday morning at 9:00. No problem.
We'll have to talk about that offline.
All the best, Colin. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Gig Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode and mostly that you learned a few things that will help you improve your business. Join us next time as we continue to bring you the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. Thanks for listening.